Hello there, I'm Rob Breyer. I am a Green Party councillor on Bristol City Council. I'm going to take you through a Strategy and Resources Policy Committee recently held. And today it's going to be looking at the lack of preparedness of certain councillors. Now, this isn't to criticise councillors overall. I think largely councillors do a very diligent job, keep on top of everything, kind of know what's going on. But this is a good example of when they don't. So we're going to start by listening to Councillor Ellie King. Now, Ellie is a councillor for Hillfields Ward. She's a Labour councillor, and she used to be on the Mayor's Cabinet before Bristol changed its system from a mayoral system to a committee system. So here's Ellie, and they're discussing the Bottle Yard Studios, which is a large studios that Bristol owns. And the proposal in this meeting is to look at the future of the Bottle Yard Studios and whether to dispose of the asset. So basically, Bristol hasn't got very much money and it's looking to potentially gain some money by selling that asset. So here's Ellie responding as the first person, I think, in the debate in this committee.
Thanks, Jack. I'm just going to make a couple of practical points around challenges that I've had on this. So there was a briefing set up in July, which I accepted the invite for, and then it was cancelled, and then one was set up in August, which I was unable to make due to being on annual leave. Neither was Councillor Renard, who would have had to exempt herself anyway, but neither was Councillor Rippington, so none of the Labour members on this have unfortunately had a briefing on it yet, and that wasn't rearranged by officers, which is a bit unfortunate.
So that's a fair point, you'd think. Let's get on to the next part of the meeting. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Bear with me. So here, in the intervening period, basically, there have been some tech issues that are explained to people, and there are some constitutional situations to sub in that are explained. There's also a conjecture that basically we can't delay making a decision on this, even if you haven't seen all the papers and if you haven't come to the briefings. We then get to Councillor Tim Rippington, who's also a Labour councillor on the committee, who says this.
At the moment, I think with the briefing, I don't think any of us realised that briefing was going to be. I thought it was just a briefing on what the Bottle Yard was and how it worked and that kind of thing. I don't think that, well, I don't know because it wasn't there. I don't know whether it was a briefing that would directly have had an impact on how I feel about this today. So, but if it was, then I do think it would have been on officers to ensure that we were properly briefed on it if it was something that was, coming to a committee and we were expected to make a decision on a bit later. I think.
So it's a direct challenge to officers that they've not provided enough briefing to these two Labour councillors.
The way we feel is that we don't really have enough information at the moment for us to make a proper decision on this right now.
One thing to bear in mind at this point is that Councillor Ellie King, who was the first person who spoke, the entire idea of selling the Bottle Yard came to Cabinet while she was on it. She was in the former Labour Mayor Marvin Rees's cabinet up until the change to the committee system earlier this year. So she's got a lot of knowledge of that this was coming forward. She'll have been briefed numerous times over that period.
Councillor Galandris.
I think it's what's being sought at the moment actually is simply an agreement to explore a possible sale. That's all we're being asked for at the moment. So I'm always happy to consider selling anything at the right price.
So a little bit of a funny from the Conservative councillor John Galandris there. Always willing to sell anything. As we know about Tories, they love a bit of selling off public assets. But the point being here, whether or not this is a good idea to sell off this public asset, I actually think it is, because we've got massive budget constraints, and actually we need to kind of make some revenue from somewhere, and it could be run fairly effectively by the private sector. This particular asset. It's different when it comes to things like the NHS and like schools, libraries, hospitals, things like that. I think it speaks volumes that the Conservative councillor who is I think I'm right in saying an accountant, is saying that basically, yeah, we're just making a decision in principle, we're not making a final decision. But of course, that doesn't play into the Labour narrative, which is that basically they're up in arms, they haven't been included, it hasn't been transparent. They've had all of the papers sent to them, and they've had the opportunity to be briefed. Let's move on. And hear what Green Councillor
I've got a very mind about it, and we have sold assets before. The port, the airport, we had investments.
Not all good though, John.
Good opportunity to realise them, and I think it's the same here, as you quite rightly said, Alex. But we're absolutely not looking at a fire sale. We're actually looking at an opportunity here. If the price is right, if the opportunity is right, that's what we're being asked for, and I'm quite content to give that agreement in principle.
Councillor Stafford Townsend.
Here's the one.
I just wanted to say that I was quite surprised that former cabinet members and Group Whip are surprised about how this works and how to find information. I think it's just surprising that you didn't know how any of this works up until this point in time, because none of this is new.
I've never had a paper like that come through on ModGov before where I've not had the same versions of the people. It's just a unique experience.
Oh, that's interesting. So what you're saying is that you've been given privileged access to information in the previous administration that you don't have privileged access to now, but that you do have access to. It's just you've got to figure out, use your brain to figure out how to actually access those papers. Or maybe ask someone. Maybe ask someone.
I don't see why I should necessarily.
Oh, says Annie. Oh. I just think this is indicative of the way that, unfortunately, Labour are approaching this period. This first 6 months after they've been tossed out of power in Bristol, they're not engaging with anything. It's not to their benefit politically. They would argue probably, or they think in their heads, for them to engage with anything, because that means that then they have to make some kind of level of ethical or moral decision about something that is a toss up. I mean, yeah, there's arguments in favour of keeping the bottle yard. There's arguments in favour of disposing of it. But you're not going to get anywhere if you haven't even read any of the papers, particularly the exempt papers, which have financially confidential information in. You're not going to have a rounded understanding of it if you're just not engaged and you're not attending things because you don't think it's important, because you haven't got the power anymore. And actually, that's the big switch that the Labour councillors have to make. They have to make this switch and realise that they're part of this. They're actually part of the decision-making structure. And if they're just going to sit on their hands or vote things down or try to vote things down, they're not going to achieve anything for the good of Bristol. They're just going to continue to be this sort of like fairly standard opposition that doesn't actually achieve much. I'm going to fast forward again to... In fact, no, I'm not going to fast forward again. I'm going to see... Just roll it on.
Inside knowledge and how to do that.
Alex.
Thanks. If I could just comment on the issue of briefing, and I'm sorry.
Here we go. This is the list of briefings that have been available on this issue, which means it's possible for them to be in a position to make a decision on this asset.
Sorry that some members were unable to be there. This has, of course, been to policy chairs' briefings. I think it's been to strategy and resources policy chairs' briefing twice. We've had a joint meeting also with strategy and resources and economy and skills. There was a site visit. We also invited ward councillors, local ward councillors, to a meeting. So I feel that there has been some good briefing. Of course, not everyone can always make every meeting. So I'm sorry if people have been unable to attend those. Just on the point.
Well, there's other points that are made in this meeting. I'm going to try and fast forward again to another point in the meeting. Just a bit further on, just about here.
Yes, I mean, obviously, it's still fairly early days in the committee process. I don't want to just run through all the processes, but I thought, Chair, it might be worth just flagging as well. Of course, we had the agenda briefing on the 2nd of September, a couple of weeks ago, where there was a draft of the paper and, all parties were represented. I think it was Councillor Reynolds there.
Oh, so Councillor Reynolds was there. Oh, Councillor Reynolds was there. So Councillor Reynolds wasn't able to come to the briefing. Oh, but he was actually at that briefing. So maybe Ellie wasn't quite, It
would be very clear to everyone there what the paper was about and indeed what the content of the paper was.
Oh, so it is clear what they're voting on. It's just they're just standing in the way of it for some reason. Not really sure why. We're going to go over to a very I mean, I should say this advisedly, but pissed off Tony Dyer, who's the chair of the committee and leader of Bristol City Council, who would like to, actually move through an agenda and get some business done. Here we go.
Okay. I have to say I'm quite disappointed with this. What I'm going to do is I am going to propose that we go to a vote on number 1, and that on item number 2, that we authorise for it to go to settle the terms of disposal and negotiate, but we also arrange a briefing. No.
It's pretty scornful, isn't it? Arrange a briefing after those 6 briefings that were mentioned earlier were just ignored, or presumably some of them came to them, but still feel like it's justified to basically throw something out because they don't want us to make a decision about it.
I'm not taking your point at this moment, Councillor Whippington.
Okay, I think fairly enough, to be honest.
Arrange a briefing for this committee in exempt session.
So basically what that means is we're going to make a decision on the first bit, which is the uncontentious bit. We're then going to close out the public to talk about the confidential stuff and have the briefing at the same time so that they can catch up, so they have time to catch up. What eventually happens in this meeting, and I'm going to stop there, I'm not going to go all the way through it. What eventually happens is they do agree the first recommendation, which is basically as I say, the sort of basic stuff, but not the final decision. And they go into exempt session, and they're going to have to come back at another stage to go through the second bit because the Labour councillors couldn't be bothered to read the papers. They couldn't be bothered. They couldn't be bothered to turn up for briefings. If they did, they clearly think that turning up for a briefing doesn't count or something. It doesn't mean you've understood anything. It's fine, I go to briefings sometimes, and to be honest with you, I zone out. But then I catch up afterwards because they'll have been recorded or there'll be some way of catching up that means that then I'm available to be able to make these decisions at the committee. It's their responsibility. They're elected to do it. That it's not up to them what the structure of Bristol City Council is. And just as it was a backbench councillor's responsibility to attend full council meetings, cabinet meetings when it was actually a fairly light-hearted situation before Marvin completely made it toxic, they're actually responsible for holding this scrutiny committee to account. That isn't what they're doing. They aren't holding it to account. What they're doing is washing their hands of it and pretending like they don't have all the available information to actively stop decisions being made in Bristol. Now, if you're one of those people who agreed that we should keep the mayoral system, think about that for a second. One of the big arguments in favour of a mayoral system is it means that we can get decisions done quickly. Well, what's happening here? The decisions being made more slowly by the very people who advocated for the mayoral system, by the very people who would argue till the cows come home that putting the decision in one person's hands is naturally going to be quicker. The only people who are stopping that decision from happening in this context, in this meeting, are the Labour councillors. Now, you get to the end of the meeting and they vote against it. They vote against even the the first bit before they've even gone into exempt session. I'm not sure why, but they do. I mean, it's fair enough. Maybe they just disagree with what we are being sold. But they haven't made any arguments in the meeting for anyone present about why that should be the case, because they've just spent the entire time angry about something that they failed to do. Pay attention, Bristol. Pay attention.